Welcome to Entanglement Radio, transcendent talk for the conscious mind. Join us for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science, new thought, and conscious healing. Explore the potential and infinite possibilities of what it means to be human with some of the best guests in radio. At Entanglement Radio, it is all connected. Now, here is your host, Angela Levesque, on the OMTimes Radio Network.
To Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on the OMTimes Radio Network. I am coming to you live today from the beautiful foothills of the Rocky Mountains here in Boise, Idaho. Fascinating topic today. Lots of people have been very excited about this on Facebook and on Twitter. We are talking about mind control and social engineering with best-selling author Marie D. Jones. So I'm very excited about that. I think it is a very relevant conversation for our day and age. And coming up next week, we have Heather Ash Amara, and we are talking about her latest book, Warrior Goddess Training. And then I'm going to be taking a week off and gallivanting around Glacier National Park. And then I'll be coming back with you in August with Dr. Eric Pearl. So some amazing guests lined up. If you need to find me during the week, you can email me at angela@hestiahealth.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Twitter at Hestia Health and Entanglement Radio. And I love to connect with my listeners, so please do reach out. And I've got to say, I've made some really amazing friendships having people connect with me about my radio show, so I do urge you to do that. As I said, today we have best-selling author Marie D. Jones on, and we are talking about her latest book, Mind Wars, which, of course, she co-authored with Larry Flaxman. And like I said, this is a really relevant topic for this day and age. The other day I was watching a documentary called Merchants of Doubt, and it was talking all about how certain industries will plant PR men that are just excellent spinners. And this is going back to, tobacco, big tobacco, when they were saying, cigarettes don't cause cancer, and the kind of people that these industries hire to go out and connect with the public and just insert these little seeds of doubt in the minds of people listening. And so, of course, they talked about climate science, and all you need to kind of do is throw out some words like debunked or crank or crackpot or conspiracy theorist, and all of a sudden you're just implanting a little bit of doubt in people's minds, and in some cases a large amount of doubt. If you look at something like climate science, and we have like 97% of scientists have a consensus of man-made climate change, and yet if you look at the statistics in the Republican conservative part of our population, it's like somewhere between around 47%, depending on what you're looking at. So clearly those merchants of doubt have been good at controlling the narrative. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to look at some of the past methods of mind control, which are just frightening and stomach turning, frankly, and kind of look at where we are today as far as manipulation and social engineering. So let's get to that. Let me introduce my guest. Marie D. Jones is the author of several books about the paranormal, metaphysics, and cutting-edge science. Many of those she co-authored with Larry Flaxman, including The Deja Vu Enigma, Destiny versus Choice, 1111, The Time Prompt Phenomenon. I've also spoken to her about viral mythology, which I thought was the coolest book name ever. And she has appeared on more than 1,000 radio shows worldwide, on television, most recently on the History Channel's Ancient Aliens series. So with that, I feel very honored and blessed to welcome Marie D. Jones to the program. Hello, Marie. How you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you so much for having me back.
I'm excited. Like I said, people are really interested in this topic, and it is very relevant for our times, I think,
Yes.
in the age of 24-hour news cycles. But we'll get to that in a minute. I want to go back a little bit and talk about some of the mind control experimentations in the past, some of the big ones that kind of stuck out for you that you wrote about in the book.
Well, this is something people don't realize. This is actually a part of our history, and I like what you said in the introduction about the words conspiracy theory and how they get thrown around to sort of implant doubt in people. But the word conspire just simply means to do something in secret. And we know we know that that's being done all the time, not just by the government, but by corporations and other entities. So our history is full of examples of how mind control and behavior modification and manipulation have been used. And we can go all the way back to ancient times when rituals were used as a method to kind of keep people in line. If you were a member of a secret society, for example, you had to follow certain rituals, certain structures, certain rules and laws, or you were banished or punished or maybe even tortured. As a general member of the population, you had gods and goddesses that demanded your perfect behavior, and rituals were used as ways to honor and worship gods and goddesses. So this stuff has been around from ancient times, but Larry and I propose that it's been around ever since humans have walked the earth. I think it's a part of our nature to want to control the thoughts and behaviors of people around us, even if we think that we're doing it in a sort of, trivial way. We just want our kids to behave, or we want our spouse to stop smoking, or what have you. So it's a part of human nature that's been around forever. But it really became a black mark on our history, especially for the United States and Canada, with Project MKUltra, which was initiated in the 1950s and eventually fell under the supervision of the CIA and ran through the mid-1970s when it was shut down after a couple of congressional hearings where it was just exposed and found to be something that was just not, it just wasn't acceptable.
And so we know now this isn't just in the realm of, quote unquote conspiracy theory. This is, like you said, they had a congressional meeting. This was in the news, and you
Right.
have discovered some of the documents and stuff from this time period. What kind of things were they doing?
We have, unfortunately, right before the hearing in 1973, then CIA Director Richard Helms called for the destruction of the vast majority of MKUltra documentation. It was all classified, obviously. That tells you something right there. And this all came out in the hearings. But some of those documents survived, and through use of the Freedom of Information Act, about 20,000 documents led to what later became called the Church Committee investigations. And what they showed was a very broad program involving dozens and dozens of different institutions, from universities to orphanages, mental institutions, prisons, homes for unwed mothers, pharmaceutical companies that were involved in this ongoing attempt to use everything from drugs, such as LSD, to psychological, emotional, sexual, and physical abuse, sensory deprivation, and hypnosis to try to control behavior and literally to control the minds of the subjects, some of which volunteered. And that's something about MKUltra that people don't realize. Many of the people that were experimented on had no idea. They had especially mental institutions, they had no say in what was being done to them. But in some of the prisons, we found that some of the prisoners volunteered to get lighter sentences. And one of those was Whitey Bulger, who is the Irish mobster that Johnny Depp is going to be playing in an upcoming movie. He volunteered, and yet he ended up pulling out saying, this is just torture. So for someone of his, sort of sinister background to say this is torture, it had to be pretty bad. So everything came out that there was just so much going on that it just boggles the mind to think about what was done to the victim.
So to what end? What were they trying to accomplish by doing all of these studies?
The original motive, from what we understand, from what the research tells us, The original motive was had to do with what's called a Manchurian Candidate. A Manchurian Candidate, a couple of great movies if anybody's ever seen them.
Yeah, they're great.
It described torture and mind control brainwashing techniques that were used on our prisoners of war during the Korean War. So the idea was, if our POWs, if our prisoners are being subjected to these mind control and brainwashing techniques, we need to learn them too, or we need to know what's being done. We need to learn how to do it to our enemies. We need to stay on top of things. So some people can say, well, the origin of MKUltra was to stay one step ahead of the enemy, but it literally became us being the enemy. I mean, the psychologists, psychiatrists, doctors, surgeons, researchers, scientists that took part in the experimentation, I think they just took it and ran with it, because the things that they were doing really were more like torture. And a lot of it originated with Operation Paperclip, which again is a program that it's not a conspiracy. It is a real program during the 1940s, 50s, into the 60s, where we brought over Nazi scientists, doctors, surgeons, and other types of experts after World War II to utilize their knowledge and their technology. And we pretty much gave them carte blanche to live here in the United States and do whatever they wanted. And a lot of these people were war criminals. So you could say that the origin of MKUltra may have had a tiny little seed of some kind of beneficial outcome, but it just morphed into a beast that eventually got so unwieldy, it shut itself down.
Wow. Well, when we get back, I want to talk about another aspect of mind control, and this idea of cults and people who follow David Koresh and Heaven's Gate and those kind of things that, what kind of person gets involved in a cult? I think we might be surprised. So we'll get to that and more when we return here with Marie D. Jones. You're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on the OMTimes Radio Network. We'll be right back.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
If you've ever said, I do want it all. I do want happiness. I do want love. And I do desire the happily ever after fairy tale life, then this show is for you. Join me, Dame Nicole Brandon, for my internationally acclaimed show, Bridal Talk Radio, every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Time, where I'll bring you the top experts in the fields of communication, money, relationships, finance, pleasure, play, travel, sexuality, parenting, real estate, adventure, comfort, care, passion, and love.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. What if business could be fun? What if business is the adventure of living? What are you choosing? Where do you do business that makes it easier, more fun, or more joyful for you? We'd love to see where you do business. Connect with us on Instagram at Joy of Business or Twitter at Joy of Business, and share your pictures with hashtags BusinessDoneWhere and Joy of Business. Let's change the world with business.
Circle of Hearts Radio is a sanctuary on the airwaves. Join me, Grandmother Elia, in the circle on Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern, as I share information to both enlighten and nourish your soul.
Bringing a more conscious lifestyle to your world. OMTimes Radio, IOM FM.
We are back, and you're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on the OMTimes Radio Network. If you're just joining us, we are talking to best-selling author Marie D. Jones, who has just recently written a book called Mind Wars with co-author Larry Flaxman, and we are talking all about mind control, social engineering, and media manipulation. So let's talk for a moment about cults, because I think this is such an interesting phenomenon, I guess, that people can so blindly follow people to things like their death, and or in the case of Marilyn Manson, committing heinous crimes on his behalf. So, tell us a little bit about cults and how that happens.
I think when you say mind control to people, the first thing that comes to their mind are cults. And that's because we have so much exposure in the news media, whether it's Manson, Koresh, or Heaven's Gate. Every now and then, or Jim Jones, my gosh, every now and then our news headlines are filled with these horrible stories about what goes on Scientology. And there are thousands of smaller cults all over the world. So I first need to kind of go to something that Larry and I wrote about in the beginning of the book in order to give people the understanding of why it's so easy for cults to operate the way they do. So part of human behavior, again, is the desire to control. And one of the ways that we do that, and we do this in romantic relationships, boss-employee relationships, friendships, family, familial relationships, is the use of positive and negative reinforcement, the use of coercive persuasion, different brainwashing techniques that we use on a much milder scale. But cults have mastered those skills. So cult leaders are usually narcissistic, psychopathic, or sociopathic, or all three. And when I say narcissistic, I don't mean they're just confident and cocky. I mean they are sick. They suffer from narcissistic personality disorder, which is a very brutal disorder to anyone who's ever been a victim of it. And we write a little bit about that too. The way that they break people down and they literally destroy your identity and you're left feeling powerless. Some people will say, oh, only stupid, weak people join cults. Not true. Incredibly intelligent people become members of cults. Very successful people. What cults do is they play upon empathic, compassionate, sensitive people. There's a lot of us out there. And they do it in this very same way that the brainwashing techniques were used on our POWs during the Korean War. They do it in the same way that victims were exposed to during some of the MKUltra experimentation. They use psychological methods that literally leave the victim powerless, without an identity, and feeling like they need to be saved by someone. Cult leaders are masters at portraying themselves as saviors, and they play upon our need and desire to be accepted and to feel like we were chosen and that we're special. So when you get all these psychological things in the mix, it makes it easy for someone that you might think, maybe a family member even, was so smart and, oh my gosh, how could Jane or Joe end up in a cult? They were brainwashed. Hands down, bottom line, they were brainwashed. And nobody can escape brainwashing. It doesn't matter what your IQ is.
Mm-hmm. So is there a way after, because there's obviously been people who have left cults, is there a way to somehow deprogram them so they can kind of wash their brain of the original brainwash?
Yeah, and that's a perfect way to think about it. So when you go into a cult, you're literally broken down and reprogrammed with whatever the ideology of the cult leader is, or the cult as a group. And you become a part of this group dynamic that becomes very difficult to leave. Some cults that will kill you if you try to leave. Cults like Scientology will literally have you, isolated from family members and friends. And we've, heard people in Scientology that have literally shunned their own children or their spouses who left the church or who tried to leave. So you've got all this stuff playing against you. But if you can get out, and if you're lucky enough to have people that are fighting for you and supporting you, it basically comes down to finding somebody who's qualified to unprogram or deprogram everything that the cult has instilled into your subconscious and reprogram it back with healthy thoughts and healthy attitudes, and try to get back to who you are as a human being and your authentic identity. And that's very difficult to do once it's all been broken apart. It's like breaking a mirror into a million pieces, and you got to put it back together. The person may not be the same, but at least they'll be operating of their own volition. They'll have their own thoughts back. And obviously the experience will have changed them drastically.
Mm. Well, one thing that is also, unfortunately, occurs quite a lot, especially in the United States, is these mass shootings, whether at a school or we actually just had the 3-year anniversary of the shootings that happened in Aurora at the movie theater.
Yes.
And James Holmes was actually just found guilty on, 126 counts. So.
Yeah, I saw on the news this morning there was something else going on, and I didn't catch it, but yeah. Oh.
And so when you guys started looking at that, was there any evidence that some of those mass shootings were a product of people being mind controlled? Because I certainly, in the conspiracy websites, people are saying things of false flag and those types of things. What did you guys found when you guys looked into that?
There's no proof. There's no evidence. But if we're speaking in legal terms, there seems to be a whole lot of circumstantial evidence in some cases based upon the behaviors of some, not all these shooters. I think that there are people out there that just go nuts, have access to guns, and we suffer for it. But some of these cases, the conspiracy theorists are able to find some really interesting backstory or links, or they focus on psychological aspects of the person's behavior that correspond with what we know about brainwashing and what we know about one of the things that MKUltra did. One of their main focuses got to the point where it was no longer protecting our POWs from brainwashing, but using these skills and techniques to create assassins, to create spies. And they did that in similar fashion to what cults do, by breaking down the person's personality and literally reprogramming what are called alters, alternate personalities. And the alters probably didn't know what the other one was doing. So you could have a person, and often this was done starting with children because it's easier to manipulate their subconscious, but you could have a person who one of their alters was an assassin. And when that assassin needed to be utilized by the military, government, whoever, a trigger word or trigger phrase or trigger image was used, that alter would spring into action, commit the assassination, and then immediately another alter would step in that forgets everything. So you've got people walking around doing things that they are not even aware of. And we go back to Sirhan Sirhan and the assassination of Robert Kennedy, and he has, from the beginning, admitted that he doesn't remember anything. And he didn't say, I didn't do it in that sense. He was literally saying over and over, I don't remember anything. And he had been under a lot of psychological evaluation where the doctors are saying, he's got some of the hallmarks of brainwashing. Now, again, is that proof? No. We don't know what's going on in the minds of these people, unfortunately. But it does get a little spooky when you find those real interesting links to brainwashing, MKUltra, and the types of behaviors and experimentation that those victims were exposed to.
So, we talked about MKUltra. Do you see any evidence that there are government programs like that still continuing to this day?
Yeah, and especially in prisons. But again, and not always the government. What people need to understand is that pharmaceutical companies test drugs on prisoners all the time. often, again, voluntarily, and sometimes not. I don't think people realize what goes on in our prisons, because people have the attitude that, oh, you're a criminal, you don't deserve to have any compassion. And these people, sometimes they're subjected to things that no human being should subject another to. And we have people in the prison system that have talked about that. There's a great movie out, I think it's out now, called The Stanford Prison Experiment, that shines a little bit of light into some of the psychological experimentation done. So they're like the perfect guinea pigs. When MKUltra ended in the mid-'70s, we have to know that it didn't just shut down. Our government doesn't operate that way. Most likely, it shattered into smaller programs that went deeper black, deeper under the radar by different names. And with the advent of advertising and pharmaceutical companies and the news media now trying to use some of these same techniques on us, on the populace, no doubt that there are all kinds of things going on that we don't know about. But I think it becomes a little obvious to us that there's something going on. And I know we have a break coming up, but we can talk about social networking, and
Absolutely.
Facebook does, their involvement in behavior manipulation.
Well, that's exactly where I want to take this show when we get back on the break. Some of the less obvious methods of mind control and social engineering that, like I said, are so incredibly relevant for today, because we are in one giant social experiment, I think, right now.
I like that. That's the truth right there.
And, being tied to our phones all the time. So I want to talk about that and talk about the implications of having 24-hour news cycles that are under the guise of spreading news, but are really about creating narratives that I think people just are so willing to jump on board with. And as I mentioned, that documentary at the beginning, the Merchants of Doubt, just how easy it is to plant those seeds and manipulate how people think and feel and the way that they view the world, which worldview is really, really important. So we'll get to all of that and more. We're talking with Marie D. Jones and about her book, Mind Wars. And you're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on the OMTimes Radio Network. We'll be right back.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Live with medium Lisa Phoenix, Mediumship Messages and Musings, explores mediumship and all things metaphysical. Lisa Phoenix invites you to reach above and beyond your everyday experiences, to explore new dimensions in the spirit world. She will do live readings to connect callers to their loved ones in spirit, shares engaging stories and teachings from her own personal experience, and will have intriguing conversations with other mediums, spiritual teachers, and healers to help you understand the metaphysical world so you can connect to these forces in your day-to-day life. Join your host on this magical and metaphysical journey into the world of spirit every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Eros Evolution is where sexuality and spirituality meets. Join me, clinical sexologist Martha Tara Lee, on Eros Evolution on Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
The Real Conscious Connection. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
We are back, and if you're just joining us, you're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque. My guest today is Marie D. Jones, and we are talking about the subject of her book that she co-authored with Larry Flaxman, Mind Wars. Well, Marie, I heard this joke the other day, and it says, if a tree falls in the forest and Fox News isn't there to cover it, is it still Obama's fault?
Oh, of course.
And I just thought,
oh my gosh.
that is just so, because as I said, they take a news event, and this isn't just, there is other networks out there. MSNBC, I guess, would be maybe on the other side of the spectrum, but most of their programming is panels. It's discussion. As I said, they're weaving a narrative around an event. It's not that they're there just reporting on straight news. They're creating stories. And so people watch that, and if that's all the only place that they get that information, that shifts their worldview. And that also changes, what they think is possible and all of those things. So is that in itself a form of mind control?
It is, and it's probably the most frustrating. It's the one that makes me the most angry today, because I can't turn on my news, even if I just want to see the weather report, which is usually wrong anyway. I can't go on to social networking or even get on my homepage without seeing, and once you start to spot false news stories, or you see who sponsors them, so you know that they're full of spin, it becomes secondhand. I do it all the time now. It's very frustrating. It's very angering. But it's called social programming or social engineering, and basically it's the use of manipulating or coercing or influencing the population with a very specific agenda of either misinformation, disinformation, rumor propaganda, or all of the above.
Well, I want to stop you there really quick. So what's the difference between misinformation and disinformation?
Misinformation is information that is bad or doesn't have any source or origin point, or it's made up or whatever, but it gets passed on because people, they just think it's true. They're not knowingly trying to do anything sinister, or they don't have a motive or agenda. So, for example, if I go on Facebook and somebody has posted a recipe for how to make a certain type of cake, and I repost it, but I accidentally leave out an ingredient, or I maybe change it a little for my own taste. That's like a really weak analogy, but misinformation is just information that's false, but it's spread around, it goes viral, because people just don't take the time to make sure it's true or look into, who posted it, whatever. Disinformation is information that is false or bad, that is purposely planted, purposely sent viral, purposely spread around to affect a certain motive or agenda. And it's usually political or religious. Or in the case of like a company like Monsanto, it has corporate tentacles attached to it. We're seeing this a lot here in California with the sudden push to vaccinate everybody in the state, whether it'll kill you or your child or not, which is backed entirely by the pharmaceutical industry. Mm-hmm. So they're planting news stories that, if you don't get vaccinated, you're going to get the measles, and oh my gosh, you're going to die. Well, first of all, not very many people in history have ever died of the measles, but what they're not showing you are the thousands of people that have died from vaccination. So that is a disinformation campaign. But misinformation is just crappy or bad or untrue information that gets passed around because people are too lazy or too distracted to check into it and make sure that it's valid.
You brought up kind of a hot button issue for me, vaccination, because I have done probably 100 hours of research into it. And so whenever I see it said that there's absolutely no research, any research that says there's any connection to anything has been debunked, which right there you're like, oh, well, okay, if it's been debunked, except I've personally found close to 70 articles, peer-reviewed articles on PubMed that talk about the different aspects of vaccine injury. And I was like, that's just clearly, it's not true. And yet it just gets perpetuated and perpetuated. And then, the industries will create these, what looks like grassroots community groups that are really just fronts for them just to share their ideas. I think somebody's called that astroturfing or something.
Yes, I love that term. And I learned about that not too long ago. Yeah, the fake grass. And it's very frustrating because those of us that do take the time to learn, whether it's because we're radio show hosts or researchers or writers or just, concerned citizens, or maybe our child has had a vaccine injury or died. Those 70 articles are the tip of the iceberg. There are thousands of solid research papers out there. There are also hundreds of cases of vaccine injuries that have actually been rewarded by pharmaceutical companies. And people just don't know. And I don't like to say that people don't know because they are evil. I don't think that's the case at all. I think today the American populace is too distracted, overwhelmed with information, too stressed out, and too busy to be able to take the time to look into these subjects for themselves. And that's why they instantly and immediately buy into misinformation and disinformation. It's easier. And I think that is one of the biggest problems that we're facing, is a populace that literally lets their reality be governed by whoever has the most money and whoever has control of the media at the moment. To me, that's terrifying.
It is. And all you have to do is watch the 6 o'clock news. And I would say at least 30% of the commercials are for pharmaceutical companies.
Hello. I am so glad you said it, because I didn't say that to people. It's like, am I the only one who notices this? So thank you. But social programming has been going on forever. And again, it's sort of a mass level of mind control and behavior manipulation, because instead of, like with Project MK Ultra, you had individuals that were being used as guinea pigs. With social engineering, social programming, it's entire populations. And we are all subjected to this. And with the rise of social networking, it has just exploded to the point where so many people are passing on stories that are made up or fabricated as news, or somebody splices a video together, or photoshops an image, and look what this awful person did, and before you know it, that person's getting death threats when they've done nothing at all. It's terrifying. Now we have the Planned Parenthood scandal, which was totally fabricated, and people have to realize that if you don't wake up, this is going to bite you in the ass, excuse my French, at some point. You're going to give into a disinformation campaign that will end up hurting you and your family. And I think that that's happening already.
So other than, we talked about vaccines, is there another example of some blatant disinformation that you have seen out there?
I think the biggest for me is the pharmaceutical agenda and the GMO agenda. They have, and when I say they, I mean the corporations, Merck and Pfizer and Monsanto, Dow, et cetera. They have so much lobby money tied into politicians that really they pretty much govern this country. It used to be the oil industry was, and the tobacco industry, but the pharmaceutical and agribusiness have become the monsters in terms of who literally is dictating the news that we see. The commercial advertising, the vast majority of it. I spent one day once watching TV all day, and I would say 70% of the advertising was for new pharmaceuticals. Ask your doctor about whatever. You may have, sort of encouraging people to look at symptoms that they have that may have nothing to do with that particular new pharmaceutical, but ask your doctor. And most doctors, I hate to say it, will gladly give you that pharmaceutical if you ask for it, whether you need it or not. I'm not saying that doctors are bad people, but they're being visited daily by pharmaceutical reps who are hammering this stuff into their heads. Many of these doctors don't have time to keep up on every current research paper out there. I'm fortunate to have a doctor who does and who won't prescribe anxiety or depression meds and will tell you to get your butt out there and take a walk and eat healthy and sleep, and decrease stress. And those doctors are becoming fewer and further between. So I think that for me is the biggest. And then, of course, you know that when there's a political election coming up, how crazy it gets.
Yeah, absolutely. Last year, I participated in the March Against Monsanto here, and actually a huge amount of people showed up. It wasn't, they didn't cover it at all here because with potatoes and sugar beets, they have a huge stronghold in Idaho. And so I wanted to check out what they were saying worldwide. So I was looking at the LA Times and the Washington Post about what they were saying, because this was an international march. And as I'm looking from place to place, they had the same AP article just reposted on the Washington Post. I was like, this is just something that Monsanto wrote and then just disseminated it into all of the outlets. I'm like, It's the exact same article, word for word. It has been shown in scientific studies, and there's a consensus about, scientists, and that there is no discernible difference between. And I was just like, oh my goodness, that's craziness. And had I not looked at all those different outlets to see that they had the exact same article about it, I don't think I would have believed it. But it's pretty amazing. Well, yeah, we're going to be up here. We're up on a break. When we get back, I want to not leave my listeners feeling like they're helpless and that
absolutely. Let's get them empowered.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about what we can do to safeguard ourselves against this, and if there is a way to do this, because it is insidious. Like everywhere you go, even right now, I've got a couple of things open up on my desktop, and there's 3 advertisements there.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
And, going the other day, I was looking for fridges, and I closed my browser and opened it up, went on Facebook, and I'm bombarded with advertisements for new fridges. And I just think that is so incredibly creepy.
They're tracking your every move that you make on your keystrokes and your cell phone. Yeah.
And I finally took Facebook Messenger off my phone because I didn't like what they're doing with that either. So when we get back, I want to leave my listeners with a little bit of hope as what we can do. So you're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque, and you're listening on the OMTimes Radio Network. We'll be right back after this break.
Feed your soul with waves of consciousness on OMTimes Radio. Join Elliot Jolish, the business therapist, each Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern for the Elliot Jolish Hour, as he interviews business experts on your behalf. And you're invited to email your business questions to questions@ecjgroup.com for answers, live, on air every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Eastern on the Elliot Jolish Hour. Being a radio host on IOM-FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Dr. Kevin here, and I want to invite you every Thursday, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, to join me on the Dr. Kevin Show, where we have a diversity of guests who help you step outside the box, behind the curtain, and see what a load of crap is going on in the world today, so you have more information with which to make better decisions. We'll see you there. Namaste.
Free your mind. Expand your soul. OMTimes Radio. IOM-FM.
And we are back, and you're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque in a segment where we like to bring it on home for you, brought to you by HestiaHealth.com, open hearts, calm minds, and inspired lives. If you want to find out more about Hestia Health, you can go to HestiaHealth.com, and don't be afraid to find me on Facebook and on Twitter as well. So, I do want to leave my listeners with some hope, but I just want to ask you really quickly before we get there, just so people really have a good idea, how pervasive is our invasion or privacy on our cell phones and our computers?
I hate to say this, but, and Larry could have spoken really well to this because he works in cybersecurity, and you have no privacy, none. You do not have privacy sitting in your home. And I'm not trying to scare people, but this is the truth. There are satellites, there are drones that have the capacity to see through walls, to see into buildings. And often that's a very beneficial thing when you're trying to find, a drug stash or a criminal hiding out. Cell phones, they track everything you do. Online, people can track you from remote locations with software that tracks your keystrokes. Anything that you buy, even search for, goes into a database, and you are then bombarded with advertisements. You have no privacy. And this is why it's so important to not let a book like this, or not let the subject matter depress you, because it can, but to get you angry. There are groups out there, activist groups forming to fight for our privacy rights. There's not a whole lot you can do individually except don't buy everything online. Go into some actual stores. So many of them are closing down because everybody's buying online. Don't use your cell phone as much. Disable any settings that track your location. That'll help a little bit. Especially, like I said, Facebook Messenger. There are apps and things that you really don't need. I don't know if people know, but when you buy an app, you always get a warning, and it tells you we're going to connect to your Facebook page, your Twitter, your bank account, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes people just accept because they want the app. They don't even read all of that. Oh my gosh. One day I was trying to buy some I love wallpaper on my phone. I always like something pretty to look at on my home screen. And when I read what I would have to accept on some of these sites, I was like, forget it. I'll just have the Verizon screen. We love our technology, we love our gadgets, but we have got to get off the addiction to them. I think also people really need to just protect themselves from the massive flow of information that is out there with the motive of changing who you are. And, spiritually and metaphysically, you can't be empowered if you're constantly under the influence of other people's thoughts, ideas, and behaviors and actions. So I really think it's about waking up, doing a little bit of research, becoming aware of what is going on, taking those little steps that you can, but, have a voice, speak out, join a group. You don't have to get out and march in the streets if you don't feel like it. But if enough people don't do that, we're going to get to the point where literally we are going to be forced by the government to eat certain foods, take certain medications. It'll be Big Brother in a way that even George Orwell couldn't have envisioned. So it really is up to us to become empowered, aware, and intelligent about what's going on.
Well, I have a few comments to that. So one, if you've ever seen the documentary Terms and Conditions May Apply, it talks all about, when it says you update your iTunes, when when it will say Facebook has updated their privacy settings, and you just scroll. And it's written in a way intended so you don't read it. Because if you did, it's super long, it's in legalese, it's very difficult to understand.
Tiny print.
Yeah, and most people just scroll right down, I agree, or I accept. And when you watch that, it's just amazing to me, like even beyond my scope. It was actually after I watched that documentary that I took off Facebook Messenger on my phone. But one thing I want to say is, be careful when you do share stuff on social media. Look into it, because I can't tell you how many times people have shared stuff on their page and it was from a satirical news site like The Onion or something. And it's like, that was completely made up. It was supposed to be funny, and yet people are just sharing it. So I think there's a little bit of personal responsibility and accountability in what you're choosing to share on your page. Look it up, read it, and figure out if that's actually real and if it's something you stand for. Like, I saw somebody else posting the other day something that Fox News said the Pope was like the worst man of the year or something. And it was just one guy in one of the panels that was being, said it kind of tongue in cheek. And yet that spread everywhere. Not that I don't think Fox News has some responsibility in this, but I'm just saying that,
opinion has become news, and that is just not going to serve us as a population. Yeah.
And so would you agree that people need to be a little bit more accountable as to what they share?
Absolutely. But again, and I hate to be negative, but most people will not do it because they'll say, I don't have the time. Okay, if you don't have the time, don't post it. Post something silly or fun. But then you also have a lot of people who have their own agenda. The thing is, again, we have to make sure that we are able to discern personal opinion from actual reality and news and fact. And that is becoming harder and harder to do because people are blending the two. And, once you become aware of it, it becomes easier. It's like you build this sort of talent, and your brain starts to really pinpoint, oh my gosh, okay, that looks fake. Let me check into that. So once you become aware of it, you see it a lot more. But people have to be willing, first and foremost, to be a part of the solution and not a continued part of the problem.
And I think with the advent of blogs too, and I have to say that, and I don't know if you'll agree, but since blogs kind of really came on the scene, I've also seen a decrease in in journalism. I think that journalists have got much lazier because they're like, well, if people can just go out and blog whatever they want, then, why do I have to do my due diligence and fact check? And it seems to me that there's just been
there is no such thing as good. I majored in journalism in college back in, the late 70s, early 80s. I'm giving my age away, but, that was the age when you did the who, what, where, why, and when, and you covered the facts, and you always had to present your sources and your origin point for the story. They don't do that anymore. It's not news. It's not journalism. It is opinion in the form of news. And, so many times I've seen like Huffington Post or other sites that have a lot of bloggers, and I thought, let me read this. And it's like, this isn't news. This is somebody blogging. There's no fact in this. There's no statistics. There's no sources. There's no direct quotes. It's, this so-and-so's friend said, and it just makes my head spin. I don't think there's any such thing as good journalism anymore.
And it's very disappointing. So kind of to wrap this up, so be accountable in what you post and what you share. Get off your phone as much as you can, and just do research and speak up where you think, have a voice in this. Because, it's
take back your mind, take back your thoughts, take back your behaviors. That's really what it's all about.
Absolutely. It's like I said so many times throughout the show, it's just such a relevant conversation right now because it is a giant social experiment and we don't know where it's going. And
right.
So we just have a couple of minutes left. So we want to give you plenty of opportunity to share where people can find your book, social media, websites, all of that stuff, anything you'd like to leave my listeners with today.
Well, the book can be found wherever books are sold, online and off. And I always suggest people actually go into bookstores because they need the business and they won't track your sales the way Amazon will. But and you can order it too if your local bookstore doesn't have it. It's free to order. My website is mariedjones.com, and I am on Facebook and Twitter at Marie D. Jones Author. And I just really want people to realize that mind control can go two ways. Either you control your mind or you let somebody else control it. And one can lead to a lot of positive things, and the other one can take all your power away. So it's your choice.
I think that's a fantastic place to leave it. I just want to say thank you so much. It's always a delight to speak with you. And yes, good luck on your book and have a fantastic rest of the day.
Thank you. Take care.
All right, so that was Marie D. Jones, and again, she is the author of Mind Wars, and you can go to her website at mariedjones.com. Coming up next week, we have another amazing best-selling author, and it's titled When Warrior Meets Goddess with Heather Ashamar, and we'll be talking about the subject of her book, Warrior Goddess Training. I've also had the privilege of interviewing her before, and she's just an amazing lady. I actually did a fire walk with her back in November when she came here in Boise, and that was a very transformational experience. And then I'm going to be going on holidays, and we'll be coming back in August with founder of Reconnective Healing, Dr. Eric Pearl. And he also, I've had the opportunity to meet him in person and do his training, and he is a really interesting character. So I'm excited to be speaking with him again. You can hear my show live every Wednesday right here at 12 p.m. on the OMTimes radio network. And if you want to learn more about myself or my services, any of that, you can go to hestiahealth.com, and you can find me on Twitter and Facebook at Hestia Health and Entanglement Radio. One thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the show, I do run a monthly contest. If you go out there and you hashtag Entanglement Radio on Twitter, or if you go to my Facebook page directly and just give me a shout out and say, hey, I'm a listener, I love the show. What I'm going to be doing is giving a free intuitive reading to one of my lucky listeners every month, which I will announce at the beginning of every month. And the one for July actually will be the second week of August, because I will be gallivanting around one of our great national parks. So with that, coming up next, we have Equilibrium FM with Claire Johnston, and she's going to be talking about the scribe. This is Angela Levesque wishing you love and light. I will see you next week.